All right, so on Inequalities Day 3, we're going to look at this problem. Again, a word problem dealing with inequalities. It says Hurricane George is 250 miles from the coast of South Padre Island and is approaching the coast at a rate of 20 miles per hour. So to start with, again, we're going to make a table to represent the relationship between the number of hours that have passed and the distance that hurricane is from the coast. So keep in mind, to start off with, that hurricane is 250 miles away. So initially, it's 250 miles out. The distance as it's approaching means the distance is decreasing at a rate of 20 miles per hour. That's my unknown, my x. This would be an expression that I could use to represent the relationship. So when I plug it in here, I'm looking for the process, and I'm going to plug in the number of hours that have passed. So for example, on the first one, I would start out with 250 minus 20 times 0, which would give me a result of 0 hours, or I'm sorry, 250 miles still away from the coast. So number 3 asks, if at least 3 hours have elapsed, what is the distance of the hurricane from the coast? So again, I'm looking at this equation here, and if I'm looking for at least 3 hours, then I'm going to plug in that 3 into the equation. So I'm going to say 250 minus 20 times 3 hours that have elapsed. So that's 250 minus 60 in all. So that would give me a total of 190 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and put that answer in my table. Now again, I put in the center just to kind of give me an idea of what's happening around the 3 hours. So we're going to look at 2 hours and at 4. At 2 hours, the distance would be 210 miles away. And at 4 hours, the distance would be 170 miles away. So if at least 3 hours have elapsed, I'm talking about 3 or more hours. And as our hours increase, our distance is going to decrease. So for our statement here, would say if at least 3 hours have elapsed, then the distance would be no more than 190 miles, or 190 miles or less. All right, number 4 asks us to find if the hurricane is no more than 75 miles from the coast, how many whole hours have elapsed for the hurricane to get this far? So what we're going to say again this time, instead of giving us the hours, it's given us the miles. Remember, this is our expression that we're using. So x is the number of hours that have elapsed. The answer I get out of that is the number of miles that it is away. So we're going to set this up to equal 75. So we're going to say 250 miles minus a rate of 20 miles per hour has to be no more than. So no more than means less than or equal to 75. So to solve this one, I solve just like I do any other equation. I'm going to start by subtracting 250 from both sides to cancel that out. That's going to leave me with negative 20x is less than or equal to negative 175. And then I would divide both sides by negative 20. So this would give me x must be greater than or equal to 8.75. Remember, when we divide by that negative, that sign's going to flip. Now, that means that it takes 8.75 hours to get to 75 miles. What I want to see is the whole numbers on either side of 8.75, which would be 8 and 9. So at 8 hours, the distance would be 90 miles away. And at 9 hours, the distance would be 70 miles away. So remember, I'm trying to come up with my statement question. So if no more than 75 miles have elapsed, that means 75 or less, I'm looking to see what's happened to the hours. So our hours would have to be at least 9 hours. So my statement this time, if the hurricane is no more than 75 miles away, at least 9 hours have elapsed. All right, same concept on number 5, which says when the hurricane will be no more than 100 miles from the coast. So again, I'm going to use this expression. This time I want to find no more than 100 miles. So I'm going to set my expression 250 minus 20x, and it has to be no more than, so again, less than or equal to 100 miles. So I'm going to solve this the exact same as I solved the last one. I'm going to start by subtracting both sides by that 250. That's going to leave me with negative 20x is less than or equal to negative 150. And then I divide both sides by that negative 20. When I divide both sides by negative 20, I'm going to get x is then greater than or equal to, sign flips, to 7.5. So that means it takes 7.5 hours to reach 100. What I want to see, though, is the hours on either side of 100. Again, the whole hours. So that's going to be 7 and 8. So if 7 hours have elapsed, the distance would be 110 miles. And if 8 hours have elapsed, the distance would be 90 miles. So to create my statement again this time, I'm looking for it to be no more than 100. So 100 or less. And I'm looking to see what's happened to the hours. So at 7.5 it hits 100, but for the whole hours, it would have to be at least 8. So the statement here, if the hurricane is no more than 100 miles away, then at least 8 hours have elapsed. Okay, so this one asks us to find the distance from the coast if no more than 10 hours have elapsed. So this time I'm going to take it and plug it in where that x is. So I have 250 minus 20 times 10 hours that have elapsed. That's going to be 250 minus 200. That means it's going to be 50 miles away at the time 10 hours have elapsed. So let's put that in the table. And remember, this table helps me out to see what happens on either side. So let's look at 9 and 11. So if 9 hours have passed, the distance would be 70 miles away. And if 11 hours elapse, the distance would be 30 miles away. So to get my statement on this one, I'm going to look to see if no more than 10, that means 10 or less hours have elapsed, then what's the distance? So the distance, remember, as our hours are decreasing, our distance is increasing. So the statement here, if no more than 10 hours have elapsed, then the hurricane would be no less than 50 miles away, or 50 miles or more away. All right, last one. This says, how many hours will it take for the hurricane to be less than 15 miles from the coast? So again, in this expression, I'm given the miles. So that's going to mean I'm going to set it equal to, or using an inequality, to 15 miles. So we're going to say 250 minus 20x. And this time I want it to be less than 15. So less than 15 miles. So let's solve for this one. We're going to start by, again, moving that 250 by subtracting it. So this is going to give us negative 20x is less than negative 235. And then again, we want to divide both sides by negative 20. So that's going to give me x must be greater than, remember sign flips, than 11.75. Now again, that's where it's going to hit 15 miles. We want on either side of that. So let's look at 11 hours and 12 hours. So at 11 hours the distance would be 30 miles, and at 12 hours the distance would be 10 miles. So to make our statement here, if we want less than 15 miles, we're looking at what's happening to our hours. So as the distance decreases, the hours increase. So our statement here, if the hurricane is less than 15 miles away, then at least 12 hours have elapsed.